accepting a request coming in and then putting in a request to a model to get this data. The request coming in is looking for a parameter called city type. So we're saying, well, supposedly somebody's saying, here's a URL, and one of the parameters is something called city type, for the name of the city that they want. So can you just get that, and then put in a request to your data accessor object, in this case called city utils, to get that data. Ask city utils to find cities with that city type. It's a fairly straightforward call just straight off that parameter, but you might have to do a bit of rearranging with whatever parameter you get. So coming back from city utils, it's getting back a list of cities. So put in a request for film, cities, and get back films or cities object. So your controller has then got that collection of data. And it doesn't need to know anything about how that city utils did it. It just went off and sort of got it. And it's then going to pass it on to this viewer. Its job's more or less finished. It just needs to say, okay, can you just pass this over to a viewer program, which in this case are the JSP files in that webinf results area. So I'll come on to that just in a second. Now the way in which it passes that data over, you're invoking something else, another program altogether. You need to get that parameter of films over. So it's using this line 21. It's setting an attribute in the request block and then passing on that request block to one of these JSP files. So it's saying create an attribute referred to as cities with that cities variable inside it. So that's like a bag of cities gets passed over, or a bag of films gets passed over. And then depending on what the parameter for format is, if it's XML, then the output page is going to be this cities XML. If it's JSON, the output page is cities JSON. Out of this, you'll have an output page, and the request dispatcher is just saying, okay, tootle off, go off to that request dispatcher. That just basically invokes that viewer. Now, we've just asked a question just about an hour ago, saying, well, does this have to be JSP? No, it doesn't. It just has to be a separate class. It just has to be a separate running program. You could take the output from your controller and pass it over to another servlet if you wanted. As long as that servlet, to keep in with a model view controller approach, as long as that other servlet was just accepting the data and then doing its formatting. But that's what JSP is good for. It's good for interacting with the user, setting up what the output looks like. Particularly if you're doing HTML, although we're not in this case, but you could send it over to a servlet if you wanted, so long as you're keeping that structure. Now the reason I'm sort of pushing this structure as well is I did give people the option of doing it in a different language, and one or two have said, can I do this in PHP, because they were more familiar with doing it. Yes, you can, so long as you keep this structure. Because what we're trying to get out of you is not just that you can get these results coming out, but that you just do it the right way. That you do it what's accepted way amongst the programming community, that you make something that's really easy, adaptable, easy to maintain, and this MVC structure allows you to do that. You could put it all in just one massive piece of code. All these three little components could just be one single piece of code if you wanted. You'd find that a bit harder to maintain then if you didn't sort of keep this structure. This thing is just called referred to as a design pattern. And you'll be doing a lot more of those just in January for it. The idea of sending back or sending over an object, I might say, insert film. Now I could insert a new film by Zaffarelli or something, 1990 and send over hundreds of parameters, depending on how many there are in the film, or I could just say insert film F, where F is a film object. Wrap them all up in one. Anybody who's done, and I'll keep referring to the two modules that I teach, anybody who's on the mobile app development, we have a similar idea in that. Rather than sending over a big collection of data, just send over one piece of data that's got all your requirements in it. So rather than insert film with 6 or 7 parameters, insert film with one parameter, a film object. The controller creates that film object from all the data that it's got somehow, and just asks it to sort of create it. Now yet the sample one that I gave you didn't have that in. You have got some sample film DAOs to work with. Well, this is just sort of the idea of today is to show you how the whole thing's put together and where you can work from. Because this show cities is effectively the same sort of thing. The whole Ajax data project is the same thing as the one to get you started. The thing that gets you started on your getting all your films, if you like. You can use that as the basis for it because it's so similar for it. And you've got, in this case, show cities is your controller, city utils is this model that offers things to be able to store a city, or get a city, or get all cities. So get a city where you're given a name and it returns you a city object. It goes off and gets it. Now in this particular example, all those cities are stored just in memory, doing the sort of data structure in memory. But the outside world doesn't need to know that. For all the outside world knows, it's going off to a database and getting them. You could store all your films in memory. Not a great idea to it. Now this isn't a perfect one by any instance, it's just something to get you started before we knew a lot more about these sort of techniques. I mean, just as an example, there is a sort of store city example here that takes 3 parameters. And I'm saying it might have been better to actually have whoever invokes this just give them a city object to sort of put them in there. But to tell you the truth, in this case, the controller isn't really for anything more than retrieving data. There's nothing in there about inserting data or deleting it. So whilst I'm saying this is a start point, it's exactly that. It's a start point. It's not something that's a final one, because otherwise I'm just, many people have sort of commented, you're just giving me back my own demos or something like that. You do actually have to do something in this. But certainly this is a good start point. If you don't know where to start, work with this as the starting point for it. And you have got a data accessor object as well available. Going back to week 1, inside the Java and XML exercises, you'll see a film.java and a film DAO. There's a film data accessor object, this sort of side, something like film DAO. That offers you interaction with the database, and yes, you will have to alter the username and password, but there's things like there, get all films, an example of it, get one film, given an ID. I think that's the only 2 I've just given you as a starter one. You would have to do the insert, the delete, that sort of thing. But it's a start point for your sort of data accessor object. And also in that folder, you'll see the create films. If you want to put these into your own database, you can just use nickstudent.films, That's read only though for you. Best to create your own table with it, and this little create table one, if you change line 1 to use your own ID, use Smith J or something like that, and if you're using something like MySQL Workbench, you can just take that file and paste it in and run it with your own sort of name in, and you've got that films table created, ready sort of for you, to save you typing in a lot of sort of data. You can use mine if you like, but that's what you're only allowed to read from that. It's a read-only table to sort of work with. There's a similar one for the data store part to this as well. So we've covered there this controller and the model part. And as I say, use the cities one as a start point. I also gave you one for, well, the exercise, and this is where I know not many people actually did this. There was a customer-based example. The demos talked about cities, and you have this show cities, and it's all a working demo bit. The exercises were for you to repeat that, but with a customer object, and then do show customer.